Alibi in Ashes, the 25th Nancy Drew game, is the first time in the series we get to see Nancy's hometown, River Heights. Introduced in the first Nancy Drew book, Secret of the Old Clock, River Heights is your typical American small town, absolutely teeming with criminals. Oh, a life-size dancing puppet is haunting a local acting troupe to divert attention while a gang of criminals search for hidden treasure? That's just an average Tuesday in River Heights. And Alibi in Ashes is no different. The game kicks off with Nancy almost immediately getting framed for arson. This is the only Nancy Drew game where you can both burn to death and get arrested in the first 5 minutes. If that's not enough to recommend the game, I don't know what is. Nancy's friends then undertake a desperate quest to exonerate her, which involves getting the high score on this little numbers game, customizing their ringtones, and eating copious amounts of ice cream. It's not all ice cream and sunshine, though. Lurking beneath the game's cheery veneer is a much darker sub-story which indicates the true nature of the town. I'm Snuggly and you're watching Heights 9 News. Newsflash! This video will contain spoilers for Nancy Drew Alibi in Ashes, so look away if you haven't finished playing the game yet. Back to you, Jim. The setup for Alibi in Ashes is that Nancy is in town to participate in the annual Clues Challenge, an event which seems unfairly biased towards River Heights' friendly neighborhood internationally renowned super sleuth. According to the entry form, the Clues Challenge is a week-long scavenger hunt in which teams compete to find a hidden medallion by solving cryptic clues. The prize for the winning team? Putting a personal item in the town's time capsule and presiding over the closing ceremony for Anvil Day. Who wouldn't want that honor? What is Anvil Day, you might ask? Great question. I really wish I could tell you. The history of the founding of River Heights seems to involve anvils in some way. The town's founder, Ethan Mahoney, was a blacksmith, and inside the town hall you can see a nugget in a display case, which, as a plaque tells us, was part of River Heights' very first anvil, implying that there have been multiple anvils of import. But just why anvils are so significant to the town's history remains elusive. The best I can tell, Anvil Day is equivalent to a Founders' Day type celebration with fireworks and people getting hammered. You know, anvils. Joining Nancy in the Clues Challenge are her friends, Bess Marvin and George Fain, and her boyfriend, Ned Nickerson. They are participating under the name Team Danger. The amount of secondhand embarrassment I feel right now is, frankly, hazardous to my health. The most clean-cut teens you know, trying to act edgy. The game starts as many Nancy Drew games do, with a close-up of Nancy's desk. Usually, the desk serves as a stylized menu, a starting place before Nancy jets off to her latest mystery destination. But in Alibi in Ashes, the desk serves as more than just an intro screen. It's a physical, interactable object in the game world, a place you can return to throughout your playthrough. You can even open the drawers and find clues and Easter eggs inside. It feels quite cathartic after so many games and so many years of seeing the desk as a static object, to be able to finally interact with it. We join Nancy at her desk midway through the Clues Challenge, when she has already solved several riddles. I'm a bit disappointed that the Clues Challenge doesn't serve any gameplay purpose. I know I'm not the only member of the Clue crew who's a big fan of little riddles, and it feels like such a missed opportunity to not make any part of the Clues Challenge interactive. It's great puzzle material just sitting there, gathering dust. Anyway, Nancy has just finished deciphering another note directing her to the old town hall, which almost immediately bursts into flame upon her arrival. Nancy escapes by solving a puzzle, because how else is a girl detective going to escape a burning building? She flees the fire to find a number of handy suspects hanging around, such as reporter Brenda Carlton, who promptly accosts Nancy and accuses her of setting the fire on live TV, which kind of tells you everything you need to know about Brenda. She never lets the truth or an ungodly hairdo get in the way of a good story. She is a one-woman media empire, the beating heart of both River Heights' newspaper and local TV station. Also loitering at the scene of the crime is Alexei Markovich, owner of the local antique shop and the OG junior detective in River Heights. He operated under the moniker The Magnificent Markovich, claiming no case too big, no fee too small, a slogan which probably had a hand in giving people in this universe the idea that they don't need to pay detectives for their work. He was eventually accused of stealing from a client, and, having been publicly disgraced, retired from the amateur sleuth lifestyle and embarked on a new career as Old Man Yelling at Cloud. Then there's Deirdre Shannon, who has a heated rivalry with Nancy. And I don't say those words lightly. It's a bit of a one-sided rivalry, though, in the sense that Nancy doesn't really care what Deirdre does, and Deirdre cares too much about what Nancy does. Stay tuned for my 10,000-word essay on Deirdre later in this video. Standing next to Deirdre is Antonia Tony Scolari, a local politician / ice cream shop owner. The archetypal girl who can do both. And by both I mean she's greedy and corrupt. She puts the DQ in drama queen. We also meet Chief McGinnis, a recurring character in the Druniverse, although this marks his first and, as of 2026, only appearance in the games. He interrogates Nancy about the fire, then allows her to leave, but smash cut, it's the next day and the chief has shown up on her doorstep to arrest her.
My hands are tied here, Nancy.
That, right there, is your first hint that all is not peachy keen in River Heights. Nancy asks him what he means, but Chief McG ignores her question, which is even more sinister. He takes her to the police station, locking her in a holding cell. Oh, Charles Cheeseburger Head, we're really in it now. Nancy then has to make the call every parent dreads. Their child asking to be bailed out of jail because they've been accused of arson. Because she is awarded privileges no other accused criminal would be, Nancy is allowed to make as many calls as she likes. After her father, she phones her friends, and we are introduced to the worst mechanic in the game, the mechanic which significantly hinders what would otherwise be a perfectly enjoyable Nancy Drew game. Alibi in Ashes lets you play as not just Nancy herself, but all of her friends, Bess, George, and Ned. This sounds like a fun concept, but in reality it is implemented shockingly poorly. You switch characters by using Nancy's phone, but it's not as easy as simply calling the character you'd like to swap to. Nancy acts as a go-between, meaning that you first have to call her, and then, as Nancy, call the next character, as though they're all in the midst of an intense feud and refusing to talk to each other, and Nancy is the only person they're all still in communication with. This mechanic wouldn't be quite so bad if switching characters weren't such a substantial part of the game, but each of Nancy's friends has a different relationship with the suspects, giving you a reason to frequently swap between them. For instance, Alexei doesn't like Bess, Deirdre only likes Ned, and no one feels any kind of way about George. There are also certain items which can be locked to specific characters. What this amounts to is that you spend a significant portion of the game time just staring at a phone, and thanks, I do enough of that in my life already. This mechanic is so close to working smoothly. If you could directly call the character you want to switch to, it would be instantly improved. I imagine it's designed the way it is so that Nancy can impart vital pieces of info and delegate tasks to her friends. But that could be achieved through other methods, like spontaneous phone calls or text messages. And this ignores the fact that Nancy's friends have been omniscient in every other game.
Can you guys give me a clue? I'm not sure what to do next.
Have you met everyone?
See if Rose has any information on whoever is working in the house.
She probably has a schedule on her desk.
I guess they have selective omniscience. For the most part, the player characters all have the same dialogue options when chatting with suspects, making them feel interchangeable. Technically, I know they all have distinct personalities, but when they all have the exact same reaction, it flattens them out.
Will you help us let
The town know that Nancy's innocent?
I'm not fully convinced that's true. Plus, that's not how things work.
But
She is innocent.
Then why is she in jail?
because she's been framed.
It's a shame they don't have slightly different approaches to dialogue, although I understand that would have been a lot more work for everyone involved. But it would have given a compelling reason to replay the game. While I have personally replayed each of the Nancy Drew games at least 50 times, I know not everyone is a freak like me. Phone calls completed, Chief McGinnis tells Nancy that she's allowed to wander the police station free and completely unsupervised, with the front door unlocked, but he's trusting her not to leave the building, okay? Which shows that it pays to be close personal friends with the town police chief. Nancy is perhaps the world's only accused criminal who's allowed to operate under the honor system. This means she is able to access all the police's resources and equipment to aid in absolving herself. Meanwhile, Nancy's friends are set loose on River Heights. Their first assignment is to retrieve the note which lured her to the scene of the fire, now slightly singed. This again introduces another major gameplay component, which unfortunately is also a little tedious. For the first 2/3 of the game, Nancy's friends are tasked with collecting evidence to clear her name. Guess what happens in the last third of the game? But the collecting isn't the tedious part. All these pieces of evidence then need to be dropped off at the police station. Hey, it's your DoorDash driver. I'm outside with that piece of vital evidence you wanted. What this amounts to is that you spend a significant portion of the game time just driving around, and thanks, I do enough of that in my life already. When driving, you're presented with this car playmat view of River Heights and its urban planner's fever dream of a town grid. Being in Nancy's hometown should be exciting, but its potential is, in my opinion, squandered. The setting is severely underutilized considering how many opportunities being in River Heights presents. The locations you can actually visit are pretty limited, especially as the majority of the characters are bunched together, meaning you will mainly be traveling between two locations, Scoop and Alexei's shop. While you can technically stop at more locations, such as the zoo or Pizza Palace, they only offer short sound clips, not even photographs like in Secret of the Old Clock. Those spots that you can walk around in lack a sense of authenticity. There's no gum on the sidewalk, no smudges on the windows, no litter on the streets. The town feels more like the set of a Hallmark movie than a real place. And the Drew family home is the worst offender. How I hate Nancy's sterile house. Not a single dust bunny or dirty sock in sight. It feels unlived in and lacks the coziness of other homes in the series. The decision to include trinkets and souvenirs from all of Nancy's previous cases and then hide them away in a closet is completely baffling to me. After receiving the evidence from her pals, Nancy then needs to compile it on the case board in the police station. I guess Chief McGinnis is again just trusting her not to forge evidence. He's truly putting the Guinness in McGinnis because he must be drinking on the job if he thinks this is an acceptable way to treat a suspect. Is the accused criminal in the room with us right now? The various pieces of evidence you need to collect are alibis from every suspect, fingerprints, and potential accelerants. You also need a sample from the fire's point of origin, as mentioned in the Investigating Arson for Dummies book Nancy finds in the police station. Various other clues also turn up, which need to be added to the case board, such as the keys to the town hall's fire alarm, found in Alexei's shop. One of the things I like most about Alibi and Ashes is that the gameplay is largely composed of actual detective work. The earlier games involved a lot of tactile investigating, but as the series progressed, they started to lean more into puzzles rather than replicating the job of an amateur sleuth. Alibi and Ashes, though, makes an effort to return to these roots. While there are still puzzles in the game, there's really not a lot in comparison to other titles of this era, like Tomb of the Lost Queen and Shadow at the Water's Edge, both of which are bursting at the seams with puzzles. Some of the puzzles in Alibi and Ashes even overlap with the detective skills, such as lockpicking, a mechanic which is sorely underutilized. Despite being presented with a whole guide for picking different kinds of locks, you only have to do it once when breaking into the filing cabinet at Scoop. Within, you find a land use application which suggests that Tony wants to tear down the old town hall and build a new development on the spot, giving her a compelling reason for wanting the building to burn to the ground. She aspires to be the only occupation more evil than a politician. A landlord. She also has a spreadsheet in which she's meticulously noted down all the local crimes Nancy has solved, and the exact percentage public approval of city council dropped as a result, giving her a compelling reason for wanting to see Nancy burn, brackets metaphorically. Unless Nancy then asks Ned to take Deirdre on a date, which, had any other girl made that request of her boyfriend, would seem like a test of his fidelity. But we know few things are more sacred to Nancy than a compelling mystery, and her relationship is not one of those things. So Ned asks Deirdre out, even though he has zero romantic interest in her and no intentions of following up. This scheme has the cruelty of a high school prank, especially because Nancy's other friends immediately take the opportunity to rummage through Deirdre's private diary like seagulls swooping in on your french fries the moment you let your guard down. And when Nancy gets out of prison, she makes a point of rubbing the phoniness of the situation in Deirdre's face. Makes you wonder, who's the real bully here? Tucked into Deirdre's diary is a notice of a traffic violation, which, when searched in the police database, places Deirdre at the old town hall right when the fire alarm was turned off. You want to talk about alarms? Because the amount of breaches of privacy going on right now is positively alarming.
Power ballads, the #1 cause of running red lights.
Put your best guess as to what Deirdre was singing in the comments. As this game was released in 2011, I'm guessing Firework by Katy Perry. Speaking of music, let's talk about the game's soundtrack. Another flawless transition from Snuggly. As always, Kevin Manthai kills it. While it's not my favorite soundtrack in the series, it perfectly suits the setting and gameplay. The songs are a mix of peppy and cozy with a slight country twist, as if to suggest a down-home, small-town quality. There's also some great sleuthing music. Chill beats to Junior Detect 2. I sense hints of the music from previous games in the soundtrack, particularly Secrets Can Kill, perhaps winking to the fact that Alibi and Ashes is an anniversary game, or to the fact that they were scored by the same composer. There's a poignant similarity between the track Home from Alibi and Ashes and Eloise's House from Secrets Can Kill, which my heart says is deliberate. One of the game's other strengths is spreading suspicion pretty equally between all the characters. They each have different and compelling reasons for wanting to see Nancy fail. They hate to see a girl detective winning. And when you look into the suspects' alibis, none of them check out. You could say their alibis are as insubstantial and worthless as Ashes. Deirdre lies about being with her friends. Alexei claims he was giving a talk, which was actually cancelled. Tony says she was at Scoop, but the store was closed that day, and Brenda was allegedly working, but provides no evidence to back this up. You would have thought the TV reporter of all people would have video evidence of her doing her job. Okay, so you've collected everyone's alibis. Now what? You're stuck? Why don't you try this app? I hear it's supposed to be helpful. That's right, this game sees the return of the hated Hint Hotline, the worst hint delivery system in all the Nancy Drew games. If you get stuck, I don't know what to tell you except open game boomers. I guess they couldn't have Nancy's usual phone friends providing hints when they're supposed to be figuring things out themselves. But I think a better alternative than the Hint Hotline would have been to get Chief McGinnis to act as a hint master. It would have given him more of a role in the game, as he spends the vast majority of it shut up in his office telling Nancy to leave him alone, and probably chugging pints of Guinness.
Is the world ending? If the world is not ending, whatever you gotta say can wait.
It would make sense for him to provide guidance considering his knowledge of police procedure, although maybe not, considering his defining character trait as being stupider than the 18-year-old amateur detective who keeps showing him up. After breaking into an evidence locker in the police station, Nancy finds a report which states that the fire alarm at the town hall wasn't working when the fire started, meaning that the sprinklers didn't go off and the fire department wasn't automatically called. This gave me pause, because that kind of makes it look like the culprit was hoping Nancy would die in the fire. Using the resources available to her, aka the police equipment and her lawyer father's connections, Nancy discovers that the accelerant used to start the fire was isopropyl alcohol, which Brenda keeps a bottle of in her van. 'Cause sometimes Red Bull just isn't enough, you know? Additionally, Nancy determines that a fingerprint found on a note intended to lure her to the town hall also belongs to Brenda. With enough additional evidence on the police board to cast reasonable doubt on the case against Nancy, Chief McGinnis gives a get-out-of-jail-free card to his favorite felon. Don't let it happen again, you little scamp. After a grueling jail stint of approximately 2 hours, Nancy is finally free. The first thing she does? Confront her ops, after eating 15 bowls of ice cream. Having free reign in the police station with access to unlimited snacks and the best lawyer money can buy is tougher than it looks, okay? Alexei is effusive in his offers to help Nancy. He reveals his tragic backstory. His junior detective career was cut short after he was framed by local politician J.P. Bennington when Alexei outed him as being corrupt. Deirdre desperately tries to convince herself and everyone around her that she is entirely indifferent towards Nancy. She is unsuccessful. Tony is no longer masking her evil nature.
If someone has to take the fall for the common good once in a while, so be it.
She pressured the police to make an arrest after the fire, not caring who they tapped, just that someone took the fall. Chief McGinnis really missed an opportunity to do the funniest thing and arrest Tony for the crime. Brenda threatens Nancy and tells her to leave River Heights, which shouldn't be a problem, considering she's out of town 364 out of 365 days of the year. She literally already has a flight to Egypt booked for tomorrow morning. It's pretty obvious at this point that Brenda is the culprit. But I guess her fingerprint being on the evidence and the particular accelerant used to start the fire being found in her van aren't enough to convince a jury who would convict Nancy just because they said she was guilty on TV. And despite being released from jail, the common people of River Heights are still convinced of Nancy's guilt, which is proved when someone throws a rock through her window with a threat taped to it. Arsonists will get a taste of their own medicine. Nancy eventually realizes that Brenda has been using underground tunnels to creep and crawl around town like the sewer rat she is. The tunnel entrance is underneath Brenda's van, and Nancy follows it to Brenda's secret underground lair, in which there's a convenient gift bag full of all the damning evidence against Brenda that Nancy could possibly need. She also has a dartboard with Nancy's picture on it, which is very funny. Mustache-twirling villain-type shit. Just at that moment, Brenda walks in, gives a short and evil speech, and then locks Nancy in the tunnels. She escapes by, you guessed it, solving a puzzle. On her way out, she finds the Hidden Clues Challenge medallion. Nancy takes her goodie bag of evidence to Chief McGinnis, who arrests Brenda on live TV right in the middle of her broadcast, outing himself as a messy bitch who loves drama. In a letter to Hannah, Nancy's housekeeper/surrogate mother, who is unjustly left out of this game, Nancy knots a few loose ends. The old town hall is set to be replaced by a museum celebrating the area's history, so maybe we'll finally find out what Anvil Day's all about. And as her reward for winning the Clues Challenge, Nancy gets to put an object of her choosing in the town time capsule before it's reburied. She selects her How to Be a Detective book in case people in the future ever find themselves getting framed for arson and need a little tutorial. The message I'm taking away from this plot is that you're allowed to be a little morally dubious if you're trying to break your BFF out of prison. Also that not everyone will like you, not even if you're world-renowned girl-next-door detective Nancy Drew. Honestly, it's impressive that Bess, George, and Ned are able to absolve Nancy so quickly considering how easy it is to get distracted by side activities along the way. Which I think is completely justified, as the mini-games in Alibi and Ashes are some of the best. First, there's Number Punch, in which you try to click on the numbers 1 through 41 in order as fast as possible. Simple yet addictive. But my favorite is Swap-A-Lot, which is based on a puzzle that previously appeared in The Captive Curse. The idea is that you swap letters vertically until you piece together an iconic quote from one of the other Nancy Drew games. Both of these mini-games are fun and diverting, but Swap-A-Lot has the added enjoyment of recognizing a familiar line of dialogue as it comes together and getting a burst of, I know that. There are actually a lot of references to past games in Alibi and Ashes, even more so than usual, as this title marked an anniversary in the series, being the 25th Nancy Drew game. This explains why, out of all the games, Her Interactive chose this one to finally visit River Heights. And Alibi and Ashes includes not just references to the games, but to the books as well. For example, a lot of the locations were pulled straight from the books, like Fenley Place from The Double Horror of Fenley Place. Barry Wonderful from The Case of the Twin Teddy Bears, and Madame Dugran's Dance Academy from the Nutcracker Ballet Mystery, which I've read for the channel. Nothing says Christmas like attempted child murder. Several of the characters originate in the books as well, and not just the obvious ones like Chief McGinnis and Bess and George. Brenda Carlton and Deirdre Shannon first appeared in the Nancy Drew Files No. 1 Secrets Can Kill and Nancy Drew Girl Detective No. 1 Without a Trace, respectively. They're essentially the same characters in Alibi and Ashes as they are in the books, Nancy's antagonistic rivals who aspire to out-investigate her and continually fail. However, the game portrays them with slightly more nuance than their one-dimensional personalities in the books. This is especially true for Deirdre, who is, to me, the most fascinating character in the game. First, let me tell you about my theory. You've probably heard me talk about it before, but it's my channel, and I got to talk about my little theories as much as I like. I think Deirdre is struggling with compulsory heterosexuality, and her hatred toward Nancy is just a confused gay crush. Her apparent infatuation with Ned is also a byproduct of this. She's projecting her desire for Nancy onto the closest acceptable romantic interest, Nancy's boyfriend. If you're not convinced, listen to this quote.
I thought you hated me.
I do hate you, but I don't hate you. It's complicated. I just truly enjoy hating you, and I'd hate for something to happen that would throw off our equilibrium.
Does that sound like something a straight girl would say? I don't think so. That is the most closeted lesbian thing I've heard in my entire life. My theory aside, Deirdre is still a really interesting, multifaceted character. At first glance, she appears just as much a stereotype as her counterpart in the books, a catty, jealous teenage girl. But there are moments which show that her character isn't as simple as first impressions would suggest. Deirdre's backstory is very similar to Nancy's. She comes from a wealthy family, and like Carson Drew, her father is an attorney. Perhaps because of this, her parents constantly compare her to Nancy, with Deirdre always coming up short.
She's so perfect at everything. It's like, save a little for the rest of us. My parents are always bugging me. Why aren't you more like that Drew girl? She's in whatever stand, just save the blah 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 from the who cares. It gets old. Small word choices, always bugging me, it gets old, imply that this comparison is long-lasting. I get the sense that when Deirdre's parents compare her to Nancy, they care more about the renown that follows Nancy, rather than any specific characteristics Deirdre may be lacking. Deirdre's rivalry with Nancy seems manufactured by her parents, or at the very least, bolstered by them. Talking to Alexei garners more insight into Deirdre's relationship with her family.
Have you met Deirdre?
Don't know her. Know the family enough to know that I've got no interest in meeting her.
Why's that?
Her parents are dull and unimaginative. They only care about money. What are the chances that they're going to have a non-tedious, non-awful daughter?
Deirdre not only has her parents judging her for not being more like Nancy, but random strangers judging her based on her parents. And no one can spell her name right. There are 2 R's in Deirdre. Put some respect on my girl's name. Alexei's assumption that Deirdre is anything like her parents is categorically unfair and incorrect. Deirdre is many things, but I wouldn't call her dull or unimaginative.
Can you tell your friend to stop spying on me? It's distracting.
I'm not spying on you!
The fact that you responded proves my point.
Oh, shoot.
Okay, so unlike Nancy, Deirdre doesn't appear to have a loving family, but does she have supportive friends? Also no. When checking Deirdre's alibi, she gives you the phone numbers of her 2 friends who she was supposedly with at the time of the fire, and one of them rats her out and says that no, Deirdre wasn't there. She's not a very good team member, she complains, which might as well translate to, she's not a very good friend. Jessica's reasoning for this is that Deirdre is always running around doing other things. We know that she's scurrying around obsessing over Nancy and trying to interpret her every move. Deirdre, for her part, calls her friends dumb.
Anyway, we're not for real friends. They're still in the 90-day trial period. I can return them in their original packaging at any time.
She's undeniably a toxic frenemy, but I can't help but feel sorry for her. Deirdre is, in many ways, the inverse of Nancy, a version of her that grew up without the supportive and nurturing environment Nancy had, instead being raised on envy and internalized misogyny. Another interesting thing about Deirdre is that she says she doesn't care about the clues challenge, but is studying criminology at college. I think this suggests one of two possibilities. One, that Deirdre truly has no interest in detective work and chose criminology as a major to please her parents. Or two, that she is genuinely interested in the subject but is hiding her interest, perhaps to avoid further comparison to Nancy. I'm more inclined to believe the second option because of her teaming up with Nancy to investigate in Midnight in Salem, which I figure she wouldn't do if she wasn't really interested in that kind of thing. And that's another thing I love about Deirdre's character. She has an arc which carries over multiple games, but you can already see the beginnings of a change in her in Alibi and Ashes. I can only hope we'll see the continuation of her character development in future games. Personally, I can't get enough of this girl failure. Brenda, too, is given greater agency than she has in the books, which portray her jealousy of Nancy as a static thing, constant and unchanging. However, in Alibi and Ashes, Brenda takes this rivalry to its most extreme conclusion, trying to get Nancy sentenced to prison for 10 to 20 years for a crime she didn't commit. Brenda's hatred of Nancy stems from the time Nancy beat her to a story, which would have been Brenda's big break, and Brenda's ruthless ambition and competitiveness didn't allow her to simply let that go. From that point on, Brenda has been scheming, trying to devise a way to discredit Nancy and thrust herself into the spotlight in the process. Female manipulator vibes. Brenda has also been impersonating Nancy in her downtime, complete with Titian wig. You know what they say, if you can't beat 'em, steal their identity. Brenda disguising herself as Nancy is a ripe, juicy peach of interpretive potential. This act seems to subliminally betray Brenda's desire to have what Nancy does, her fame and success. Nancy is the type of person for whom things just seem to come easily, while Brenda is literally working up a sweat, getting her steps in running back and forth through the underground tunnels of River Heights. Nancy is globetrotting to worldwide acclaim, and Brenda is still stuck in the same podunk town doing articles about rat infestations at the Happy Trails Motel and Sweetie Pie's cookie record. It's not surprising that she's resentful of Nancy. I can see why her interactive chose Deirdre and Brenda to adapt for the game. In my opinion, some of the best Nancy Drew characters reflect elements of her personality back at her. Alexei is another such character, having also been a junior detective in his past. His method of using his morals as a steamroller to run over every bad guy in his way ended poorly for him when he turned in local politician J.P. Bennington for bribing his way into City Hall. J.P. Bennington then ran over Alexei with his own larger steamroller. This metaphor is getting away from me, I fear. Much like a runaway steamroller. Bennington framed Alexei for theft, accusing him of stealing his heirloom magnifying glass. Although there was no solid evidence against Alexei, he was found guilty in the court of public opinion, and his reputation was irreparably shattered. The story of Alexei's downfall acts as a cautionary tale as Nancy is perched on the precipice of her own potential downfall. There's a subtle yet evident class commentary in the comparisons between Nancy and Alexei. Nancy is in a much more secure position than Alexei ever was, considering her father's position in town being a man of both wealth and influence. Alexei's parents were poor immigrants, lacking not just in money but in social capital. They certainly weren't close personal friends with the police chief. Their respective social networks also make a difference in the outcomes of Nancy's and Alexei's cases. Nancy has a devoted support system willing to drop everything and fight for her, i.e. George, Bess, and Ned. At the time of Alexei's accusation, he had a girlfriend, but she didn't believe in his innocence and didn't stand by him. Nancy is able to clear her name and discover who actually set the fire with the help of her friends, which, let's be honest, includes Chief McGinnis. Without their boots-on-the-ground work, Nancy would likely still be in prison, until Carson fronted the $250,000 bail, at least. Alexei is still resentful of his unfair treatment all these years later and sits around in his shop with his arms crossed, inventing reasons to be grumpy. The vase that Bess knocks over is placed in the perfect position to be toppled by an unsuspecting customer. My theory is that Alexei positioned it there deliberately, just to give himself an excuse to yell.
Oh! 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 Oh no!
It seems like the only reason Alexei is still disgraced is because he still feels disgraced and won't let that feeling go. After all, the new generation, i.e. Nancy and her friends, only know about his past as an amateur sleuth, not his public scandal.
Are you the Alexei from the old stories around here?
That was a long time ago.
I can't believe that's actually you. You are the original kid detective. You should advertise that. Put it on your sign or something.
Speaking of public scandal, let's talk about Tony. It's no coincidence that Tony rhymes with phony. She's cultivating multiple personas. The sweet ice cream shop owner versus the ruthless politician, the public supporter of local vigilante justice versus privately being Nancy Drew's #1 hater. If Nancy has no haters, Tony's dead, and Brenda's dead, and Deirdre. And Tony's two-facedness feels representative of the town as a whole. Outwardly, River Heights is pretty as a postcard, with that hallmark perfection I mentioned earlier. But it's just as fake. In reality, River Heights has all the underlying menace of a Shirley Jackson story. You can't throw a stone in an American suburb without hitting an allusion to the lottery. The source of this menace isn't the town's infrastructure or any of its physical attributes, despite its diabolical urban planning. It's the inhabitants, who can be sorted into two categories: the characters we know, and everyone else, the anonymous masses of River Heights. Let's start by looking at the familiar faces, and to do that, we first have to confront a difficult truth: that almost everyone in this town is corrupt, which includes Nancy's allies, like Chief McGinnis. I know you're all shocked to hear that a member of the police is corrupt. McGinnis is clearly biased towards Nancy, whom he lets wander the police station at her leisure, even though she should by all rights be locked up. Would any other accused criminal be allowed to do that? He is also cowed by Tony's demand to arrest the closest person. His idea of justice seems to be influenced by whoever's standing directly in front of him, especially if it's someone with power in the town. On the topic of Tony, she proves Alexei's point about all politicians being corrupt.
Not everyone in politics is corrupt.
Seriously? Where's your youthful cynicism? Yes, all politicians are corrupt.
100% of the politicians we know of in River Heights are corrupt. Tony and J.P. Bennington. Tony treats politics like an Excel spreadsheet, only caring about seeing number go up and not what's best for the community. Then we have Brenda, who replaces every scrap of truth in her so-called journalism with a more provocative falsity, all in the name of ambition. There is no moral principle she won't shatter in pursuit of her big break. Including murder, including plotting to burn someone alive. Even Alexei, who is seemingly one of the few honest people in River Heights, is associated with the town's corruption due to his history with Bennington. Even those few citizens with the best of intentions, like Alexei and Nancy, can be dragged down by mere implication. No one can escape the town's web of corruption. This includes every other resident of River Heights we don't meet in the game. Prior to the events of Alibi and Ashes, Nancy was beloved in the town, but as soon as she's accused of a crime, they turn violently against her, smearing her name in the paper and even throwing a rock through her window with a note threatening to burn down her house. The same happened to Alexei. His friends, family, and the public ostracized him for stealing a magnifying glass, even though he was a cherished local celebrity only the day before. Although the evidence against him was as insubstantial as a snowflake-shaped ice cube, they immediately vilified him, completely disregarding his prior positive contributions to the community. There's a sense of mob mentality to the shifting attitudes in the town, and it's easy to believe Brenda when she underscores the significance of public opinion.
It's not up to me to decide innocence or guilt. It's up to the public.
Actually, it's up to the courts.
Officially, that's true. But the court of public opinion makes its verdict before the actual courts can even schedule a hearing. Guess which one matters more?
In River Heights, people are easily swayed by peer pressure and the majority vote. And when Nancy's name is cleared, the locals quickly swing back to idolizing her. They go from threatening to burn her house down one moment to sending her gift baskets the next. It seems hypocrisy is a regional tradition in River Heights. Like Tony, everyone who lives there has two opinions: their honest opinion and their public opinion.
What do you think of Nancy?
On the record or off the record?
Just honestly.
So off the record then. I think she's in big trouble and way, way out of her depth.
And on the record?
Well, gosh, She's just another example of what makes this town so special.
You could make an argument that these anonymous crimes can be attributed to Brenda. She wrote the article the hateful quote about Nancy appears in, and I can easily see her chucking a rock at Nancy's window. Except the same thing happened to Alexei's parents when he was young. Xenophobes smashed the window of his family's store with a rock. This is not an isolated incident. It's a pattern in River Heights. Anyone who doesn't align with the town's romanticized image gets a rock through the window. Mind you, we're talking about River Heights, the suburb with a higher crime rate than New York City. But this is all just my personal interpretation. I like to think of literary analysis as a mystery without a solution. I can gather evidence, make arguments, but at the end of the day there's no one definitive answer, but a multitude of different ways of looking at a piece of media. You can fully enjoy Alibi and Ashes without thinking there's anything sinister going on beneath the surface in its metaphorical underground tunnels. Without thinking there's some metaphorical Brenda down there plotting metaphorical insidious deeds. But I'm like a mole, okay? I like to dig and create new pathways for myself to approach the Nancy Drew games. While Phone a Friend Simulator isn't a perfect Nancy Drew game, I believe a lot of its shortcomings speak to the quick development cycle at Her Interactive at this time. 2 games every year. That's like 6 months to create a whole game. With more time, a lot of my issues with the game probably could have been improved. But hey, at least we got the endlessly entertaining premise of Nancy going to jail. Much like Nancy herself, that never gets old.